My name is Emma Williams, and this is the story of how my life was completely transformed not once, but twice. The first time, I was just a young child, not even 10 years old. If someone asked me, I would say that was the moment my entire world shattered in an instant. It all started on a chilly evening, a night that would change my life and my family's forever. I was raised in a quiet little village in Washington. My family wasn't rich, but we were content and loved one another. My father, Jack Williams, was a well-known local reporter, passionate about writing in-depth articles about issues affecting the community. My mother, Maria Williams, was a devoted nurse, always working hard but never too busy to spend time with me and my father. The nights we spent together, watching classic movies and laughing over stories, are some of the happiest memories I have from my childhood. The night my world changed, my parents were attending a ceremony to celebrate my father's contributions to journalism. I stayed home with my grandmother, Eleanor, who was famous for making the best meals and telling me enchanting stories whenever my parents were out. That evening, we were watching an old cartoon when the phone rang. I didn't know why, but when I saw my grandmother's face drain of color and heard her soft sobs on the phone, I knew something terrible had happened. We were told that my mother had passed away instantly in a car crash. A reckless driver had lost control and collided head-on with my parents' vehicle on the main road. My father survived against the odds, but he was badly hurt. His legs were crushed so badly that the doctors said he would never walk again. At the time, I couldn't grasp the gravity of it all. When I saw my father in the medical center, he was lying still, pale and in agony. "Emma, I never wanted this," he whispered, his voice raspy as his trembling hand reached out to mine. I didn't understand why he was apologizing. The accident wasn't his fault. But as I grew older, I realized that his apology wasn't about the accident itself. It was for all the hardships and challenges he knew I would face. He felt like he had failed me. Yet my father, Jack Williams, was much stronger than he gave himself credit for. As soon as he was out of the medical center and adjusted to life in a wheelchair, he threw himself into his work. He began writing sharper, more impactful pieces than ever before, using his words to confront both physical and emotional pain. His articles gave a voice to the underprivileged, and he became a well-respected figure in our town. Although our lives had changed, my father did his best to ensure I still had a happy childhood. We spent many evenings rewatching my mother's favorite films, discussing literature, and doing my homework together. Through these simple, everyday moments, he taught me a silent strength to keep going. But deep inside, there was always a sense of emptiness, a hole that nothing could fill. The loss of my mother would forever leave its mark. Slowly, life began to return to a new normal after the tragedy, but the weight of our loss was always with us. My father became a different man, not broken by grief, but a stoic fighter who fought his pain every single day. Once he adjusted to his wheelchair, he poured his energy into his journalism career. His articles became even more pointed and influential, tackling deep social issues and earning him more respect in the community than ever before. Even with his busy schedule, my father never stopped caring for me. He often pushed me to join school, clubs, and meet new people, but the truth was, I preferred staying at home with him. We spent many nights watching old films, and he would tell me stories about his past work. Occasionally, we'd have lively debates about famous authors. Through his guidance, I learned to face obstacles with determination and clarity. When I turned 18, my father encouraged me to apply to a university far away from home. At first, I hesitated. I didn't want to leave him alone, but he was persistent. "You need to grow, Emma. Don't worry about me. I'll be fine," he said, his eyes serious but filled with love. Eventually, I chose to study finance at the University of California, over 200 miles from home. The early days were tough. I called my father regularly to keep him updated about everything: school, work, campus life, even the strange new food options at the cafeteria. He always encouraged me to keep going and to enjoy my college years. At school, I met Sophia Carter, a strong and outgoing girl who quickly became my best friend. Sophia helped me adjust to student life, introducing me to club events and weekend trips. She was also the one who introduced me to her cousin, Ryan Davis, a young man working in logistics and transportation. Ryan had a warm smile and eyes that made people feel at ease. He wasn't awkward or distant when I shared my family's situation. Instead, he opened up about his own hardships, explaining how he and his siblings grew up without their mother, who had passed away when he was young, and how their father had worked tirelessly to support them. When Ryan met my father for the first time, I was astonished at how naturally they bonded. They immediately hit it off, discussing classic rock music as if they had known each other for years. Watching them, I felt a deep sense of relief. Ryan didn't just understand my circumstances, he truly appreciated and respected my family. After graduation, I secured a job at a financial consulting firm in Portland. By then, Ryan had settled into his role managing a team of drivers. Despite his hectic schedule, he often made time to visit me. 2 years passed in a blur of happiness. One crisp autumn day, Ryan took me to the park where we had our first date. There, he knelt down, looking at me with eyes full of hope. "Emma, will you spend the rest of your life with me?" I burst into tears of joy and said yes without hesitation. But there was something I needed to tell him before we moved forward with marriage. "Even I can't leave my father. He needs me," I said, watching him nervously, afraid he might hesitate. Instead, Ryan smiled softly and replied, "I've known that all along, and I would never ask you to do otherwise. We'll live together and take care of him together." With Ryan, I knew I wouldn't have to face life alone anymore. Beautiful days lay ahead, though somewhere deep inside I still had a lingering sense that life's storms hadn't fully passed. Our wedding took place on a gorgeous autumn afternoon at a small church outside of Portland. It was a simple but intimate ceremony attended by close family, friends, and loved ones. My father, despite being in a wheelchair, insisted on wheeling himself down the aisle to give me away. When he held my hand and smiled, I saw his eyes shine with pride. There wasn't a dry eye in the room as everyone witnessed that emotional moment. After the wedding, Ryan and I moved in with my father at our spacious apartment. Life seemed to settle into a peaceful rhythm. Ryan often traveled for work, but whenever he was home, he devoted all his time to our family. In the evenings, we would have dinner together, sharing stories about our day and discussing future plans. For the first time in years, I felt as though I had finally found complete happiness after all the pain and loss. However, things didn't go entirely smoothly. From the very first meeting, my mother-in-law, Helen Davis, made it clear that she didn't fully accept me. She was a conservative woman who valued social status. She wasn't pleased to learn that my father was in a wheelchair or that I didn't come from a wealthy family. Throughout that first encounter, she kept scrutinizing me with a critical gaze and asking questions that made me uncomfortable. "So your father is in a wheelchair?" she asked, her lips pressed tightly together as though she had just heard something unacceptable. "Yes, but he's a highly respected journalist," I replied, doing my best to remain calm. "A journalist?" she muttered, her tone suggesting she didn't think much of the profession. I immediately sensed her distance and prejudice. Ryan's younger sister, Madison Davis, wasn't any better. She gave me cold, dismissive looks and avoided any meaningful conversation with me. Whenever they visited, the atmosphere in the house would become tense. They barely acknowledged my father's presence and sometimes made sarcastic remarks. One evening during dinner, Helen casually made a comment laced with insinuation. "Ryan, you have such a promising future. You should have married someone from a more well-off family. It would have made your career development much easier." I felt my face flush with both embarrassment and anger, but before I could respond, Ryan spoke up. "I don't need anyone but Emma. We are a family now, and that's what matters most," he said firmly. Ryan's words silenced Helen, though the icy look in her eyes remained. Madison shot her mother a sly glance and smirked. I forced a polite smile but felt a bitter sting inside. Their words were like invisible daggers cutting deep into my confidence. Later that evening, Ryan held me close and said, "I know you've been through a lot. I'm sorry that Mom and Madison made you feel this way. Don't worry, I'll always stand by you." His words comforted me somewhat, but I knew these conflicts wouldn't disappear overnight. Helen and Madison continued to visit frequently, especially when Ryan was away. They inspected every corner of our apartment and made snide remarks as if to emphasize that I wasn't good enough to be part of their family. One day, while I was tidying up in the kitchen, I overheard a conversation between them. "It's such a shame," Ryan could have done so much better, Helen said. Exactly, Madison replied. He's a fool for getting involved with someone, like Emma and her father in a wheelchair. How embarrassing. Those words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I bit my lip and held back my tears. I knew I couldn't let them see my vulnerability. This was just the beginning of the challenges I would have to face. After months of searching, Ryan and I finally bought a charming little house in the suburbs of Spokane. The house had a spacious backyard where I imagined planting a flower garden and a vegetable patch for my father. Ryan particularly loved the open kitchen, saying he wanted to cook with me whenever he had free time. The move went smoothly, and within a few weeks we began to feel the warmth and comfort of our new home. Ryan continued managing his transportation fleet. His job became increasingly demanding, requiring frequent business trips. Whenever he was away, I reminded myself to stay strong and keep our family stable. I worked hard at my financial consulting firm during the day and spent my evenings caring for my father. We maintained our old routines, watching movies, reading, and having dinner together. Despite Ryan's frequent absences whenever he returned, he brought warmth and laughter that filled the house with happiness. But life always has unexpected challenges. One early winter morning, as I was getting ready for work, my phone rang. On the other end was a deep, serious male voice. "Hello, Mrs. Williams. This is Lieutenant David from the Washington State Police Department. I'm very sorry to inform you that your husband, Ryan Davis, has been involved in a serious accident on the main highway." My heart stopped. I held my breath, trying to listen to his next words. Phrases like head-on collision, severe injuries, and didn't make it echoed in my mind. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My hand trembled as I ended the call. Once again, my world came crashing down. In a daze, I called my father. The moment he heard my tearful voice, he knew something was wrong. He comforted me, urging me to stay strong, just as my mother had once done. The days that followed were a blur. Ryan's funeral was held at the same church where we had been married. Many people from the town, his colleagues and friends, attended, but Helen and Madison were noticeably absent. After the service, I clutched my father's hand tightly as we walked toward the car. On the drive home, a hollow emptiness consumed me. The house that had once been full of hope now felt colder and lonelier than ever. I tried to push through my grief by focusing on handling the paperwork for Ryan's estate and insurance, but before long, Helen and Madison suddenly showed up unannounced. They walked into the house as if they owned the place. Helen wore a fake, friendly smile, but her eyes revealed her true intentions. "Emma, we understand that life is going to be much harder for you without Ryan," she said smoothly. "So, we think it's best for you to sell this house and move back in with your father." I struggled to remain calm, though anger was boiling inside me. "Exactly. You don't need such a big house anymore." "Well, pack everything up and get out of here right now," Madison added with a mocking tone. I said firmly, my voice steady. "This house was bought by Ryan and me. It's mine." Not Helen froze at my firmness. She was about to argue, but realized that I wasn't easily intimidated. Madison tugged on her arm and whispered something in her ear. Finally, they quietly left, but not before throwing one last warning. "You'll be hearing from our lawyer soon." I shut the door, sank into a chair, and took a deep breath. The anger inside me slowly subsided, replaced by a strong resolve to protect everything Ryan and I had built together. Though I had lost the man I loved, I knew I couldn't afford to be weak. I still had my father and the dream of a family we had once cherished, even if it now only existed in memories. Just a week after Ryan's funeral, I received a call from James Walker, a lawyer representing Helen and Madison. His voice was polite, yet carried an undertone of unpleasant formality. "Mrs. Williams, I have been authorized by Mrs. Helen Davis to discuss her claims regarding Mr. Ryan Davis's estate. She believes that she and her family have a right to part of the property you currently own." I took a deep breath to stay calm. "Mr. Walker, this house belongs to me. Ryan and I bought it together. Besides, none of them even attended his funeral. I don't believe they have any right to make such a demand." There was a brief pause before he responded. "I suggest that you meet with us to negotiate before this situation escalates further." I ended the call, my heart filled with both anger, and anxiety. The audacity they had to make such a claim so soon after Ryan's death was infuriating. I decided to consult my own lawyer to defend my rights. The next day, I sat down with Amanda Reed, a sharp and dedicated attorney. She listened attentively to my story and nodded thoughtfully. "Did Ryan leave a will?" she asked. I shook my head. "I don't know. We never discussed it." Amanda pondered for a moment. "We'll need to investigate if Ryan did leave a will. It will make things much simpler. If not, we can still prove that the house is jointly owned by you and Ryan, unrelated to his family." A few days later, I received unexpectedly good news. Ryan had in fact met with a lawyer 6 months earlier to draft a will. I was invited to the law office to hear it read. That morning, I brought my father along with me. As lawyer Matthew Hayes opened the file, I held my breath. He began to read the will with a solemn tone. "I, Ryan Davis, being of sound mind, hereby bequeath all my possessions, including our home, vehicles, and savings, to my beloved wife Emma Williams. It is my wish that she uses these resources to care for my father-in-law, Michael Williams, whom I have come to love as my own father." I felt tears streaming down my face. Even though Ryan was no longer in this world, he had still thought of me and my father. Mr. Hayes handed me a handwritten letter from Ryan. As I opened it, I couldn't hold back the flood of emotions. "My dearest Emma, if you are reading this, the worst has happened. I'm sorry for leaving you alone, but I want you to know that you are never truly alone. You and your father are my real family. I did everything I could to protect both of you. Keep living, stay strong, and find happiness, just like you promised me. I will always be watching over you. Love, Ryan." I broke down sobbing as my father gently placed a hand on my shoulder. His eyes were red with tears as well. That afternoon, Helen and Madison unexpectedly appeared at my doorstep. They no longer had their usual air of confidence and instead looked somewhat hesitant. Helen forced a smile, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Emma, we need to talk about Ryan's estate. I think we should find a reasonable solution that works for everyone." I crossed my arms over my chest and looked directly at her. "There's no need, Mrs. Helen. Ryan left everything to me. Legally and clearly, this is my house. You have no rights here." Madison glared at me and whispered angrily into her mother's ear. Helen, however, continued in her pleading tone. "We're Ryan's family. Are you really going to cut us off like this?" I sighed, feeling that the conversation was pointless. Ryan made his decision about who his family was now. "Please leave my house or I'll have to call the police," I said. Finally, they left reluctantly. I stood at the door watching their car disappear down the street. I felt a sense of relief, but also a renewed determination. I had reclaimed peace for myself and my father, but I knew this was only the beginning of new challenges ahead. No matter what, I would not let anyone destroy what Ryan had left for me. A few weeks after resolving the disputes with my in-laws, I received a notification from the insurance company. Ryan's life insurance policy had been approved. Amanda Reed, my lawyer, called to give me the details. "Emma, the payout is enough to completely pay off your mortgage and still leave you with a substantial amount. I recommend using this money to secure your life and invest in your future," she advised. I sat in silence for a long moment, trying to process her words. Ryan had always looked out for me, even in ways I hadn't been aware of. With this insurance money, the financial burden on my father and me was lifted. I decided to pay off the entire mortgage, ensuring that this house would always remain a safe haven for us. In the days that followed, I focused on reorganizing my life. One afternoon, while tidying up Ryan's desk, I stumbled upon a small notebook hidden beneath a stack of papers. The cover was worn, but inside were familiar handwritten entries. It was Ryan's journal, filled with his thoughts, dreams, and plans for our future together. Every page was filled with love and hope. Some lines made my heart tighten. "Want to build a family with Emma? Maybe start a savings fund so our future kids can have the best start in life." I couldn't stop the tears as I continued reading. Other entries talked about our home, the garden, and evenings spent together as a family. Ryan had dreamed of such a future for us. but now all I had were memories and these journal pages to hold on to. That night, I lay awake, unable to sleep. My mind kept circling around the unfinished plans Ryan had made. It wasn't until early morning that I finally drifted off. In my dream, I saw him standing there, smiling gently as he always did. "Emma, everything is going to be all right," he whispered. When I woke up, I felt an unusual sense of peace, but it was soon interrupted by a wave of nausea. I rushed to the bathroom trying to steady myself, but the feeling didn't go away. The nausea persisted for several days, making it impossible to ignore. A thought crossed my mind. Could it be? I went to a nearby pharmacy and bought a pregnancy test. The 3-minute wait felt like an eternity. When I finally looked at the result, 2 blue lines appeared clearly on the test. I froze, sinking onto the bathroom floor as a flood of emotions overwhelmed me. Joy, fear, grief, and finally, hope. "Dad," I whispered as I stepped out of the room, tears still streaming down my face. My father, who was sitting and reading the newspaper, immediately noticed something was wrong. He put the paper down and asked with concern, "Emma, what's the matter?" I held up the test with trembling hands. "I'm pregnant, Dad," I choked out. He stood up slowly, walked over to me, and wrapped his arms around me tightly. "Emma, this is a miracle. You're not alone anymore. This child is a gift from Ryan." His words pulled me out of my initial fear. Ryan had left me more than just memories. He had given me a piece of himself, a new life growing inside me. I wiped my tears and nodded. "You're right, Dad. We'll be okay. I'll take care of this baby and protect it just like Ryan always protected me." That entire afternoon, we sat together and talked about plans for the future. I knew then that I had found the strength to move forward. Though Ryan was no longer by my side, he remained present in every heartbeat of the new life I was about to begin. One afternoon, as I was tending to the garden in the backyard, the doorbell rang repeatedly. I walked to the front of the house and immediately recognized Helen and Madison's car parked by the curb. A sense of caution rose within me. This wasn't the first time they had shown up unannounced, but after everything that had happened, I knew this visit wouldn't be simple. Helen stood on the porch, attempting to look friendly. Madison stood beside her. Helen's eyes darted around as if she were inspecting everything. I walked slowly to the door, trying to stay calm. "Emma, we need to talk," Helen said, her voice sickly sweet. "I don't think there's anything left for us to discuss, Helen," I replied, showing no sign of friendliness. She gave a forced smile and took a step closer. "We're going through some difficulties. Madison's company just went bankrupt and I'm facing financial troubles. We need a place to stay temporarily. I was thinking your father's old apartment might still be available." I felt my blood boil. These were the same people who had tried to push me out of my own home, and now they had the audacity to ask for help. I took a deep breath and replied in a calm but firm tone. "Sorry, but that's not possible. I don't want any further connection with either of you." Madison frowned and stepped forward. "You're so petty, Emma. We're Ryan's family. You can't just cut us off like this." I raised an eyebrow, meeting her gaze steadily. "Ryan's family? You didn't even bother to attend his funeral. Don't talk to me about family." Helen's expression shifted as she realized that pleading wouldn't work. She exhaled sharply, dropping the pretense of friendliness. Her eyes hardened as she spoke in a cold, spiteful tone. "Who do you think you are? Your husband hasn't been gone that long and you're already living so comfortably. And look at your stomach. You've already found someone else, haven't you?" Disgusting. Her words were like a knife to my heart, but I didn't let my emotions show. I stood tall and smiled softly, but with resolve. "My personal life is none of your business. I think this conversation is over. Please leave my house. Immediately." Madison looked ready to argue, but Helen grabbed her arm. Perhaps she realized that she couldn't win this confrontation. She stared at me for a long moment before saying bitterly, "Fine, Emma, but you'll regret turning your back on us." I didn't respond, standing silently as they turned and walked down the steps. When their car finally drove away, I felt as if a huge weight had been lifted from my shoulders. At last, I had set firm boundaries for myself and my family. They no longer had the power to hurt me or the child growing inside me. That evening, as I sat at the dinner table with my father, I recounted everything that had happened. He listened carefully, then placed his hand over mine, his eyes full of pride. "You did the right thing, Emma. Sometimes cutting off toxic people is necessary to protect yourself and the ones you love." I gave a slight nod. From now on, I would focus on my future and the baby I was expecting. My life had been filled with loss, but I wouldn't let anyone stand in the way of the happiness I was building. Ryan had given me strength, and I would use that strength to protect my little family. As time passed, the pain of grief began to fade, making room for new hope in my life and my father's. My belly grew larger, and each day I could feel this life inside me, a piece of Ryan, the precious gift he had left behind. Every gentle kick reminded me that I needed to keep moving forward, stronger and happier, not just for myself, but for our child. My father stood by me during these important moments. He often helped me tend to the small garden behind our house, where we planted vegetables and flowers, just as Ryan and I had once planned. He would smile gently and say, "Before you know it, that little one will be running all over this garden. You'll have your hands full chasing after them." Those words always made me laugh. The image didn't feel so distant anymore. Sometimes, I would imagine the day I'd hold my child in my arms, introducing them to my father, and telling them about the great man who had been their father. I began preparing everything for the baby's arrival. With help from Sophia, my best friend from college, I transformed the spare room near my bedroom into a cozy nursery. The walls were painted a soft, calming shade of blue, and I hung a few paintings I had created during my free time. The small crib that Ryan had promised to assemble was now completed by my father in his. Each time I looked at the nursery, I felt both joy and an ache in my heart. Ryan should have been here helping me with all of this, but I knew that though he was no longer physically present, his love remained in every aspect of my life and our child's. One late spring afternoon, as sunlight streamed through the trees, in the garden, I felt the first contractions. My father quickly called an ambulance and took me to the hospital. It was a period of intense anxiety and pain, but I never felt alone. I knew Ryan was watching over me from somewhere far away, and my father was by my side, holding my hand through every difficult moment. After many hours of labor, I finally heard the first cries of my baby. It was a boy, healthy and full of life. A nurse brought him to me and gently placed him in my arms. I looked into his tiny eyes that resembled Ryan's so much, it took my breath away. Overwhelmed by emotion, I whispered, "Welcome to the world, Ryan Jr." My father stood beside me, his eyes red with tears of joy. "He looks just like his father," he said, his voice thick with emotion. The days that followed were busy, yet filled with happiness. My father and I took turns caring for Ryan Jr., and every moment with him felt like a renewal of my life. The pain of the past slowly faded, replaced by small daily joys. His first smile, his babbling attempts at words, and his wobbly first steps. One day, as I held Ryan Jr. in the garden, my father said something I would never forget. "Life has given us many challenges, but it hasn't forgotten to bless us with the most precious things. You've done it, Emma. You've rebuilt your life." I smiled and hugged my son tightly. "Yes, Dad, and I'll keep living for the people I love." The warm afternoon sun filtered through the trees, embracing the three of us. Though there would still be challenges ahead, I knew I had become strong enough to face them all. My life had changed, but now it was filled with love, hope, and wonder. Emma Williams' story is a testament to the power of love, resilience, and the ability to overcome adversity. Despite facing loss and continuous challenges, she found hope through the child her late husband left behind. With support from her father and friends, Emma rebuilt her life, protecting her little family from negative influences. Her story reminds us that no matter how tough life gets, love and determination can lead to renewal and open the path to wonder and happiness. What are your thoughts on Emma Williams' story and her journey to rediscover happiness? Share your opinions on the characters and the most memorable moments. Don't forget to follow the channel for more inspiring stories about life and family, an old car and a few dresses. Sophia silently opened her folder and pulled out a copy of the prenup, the very document I hadn't laid eyes on since signing it at 25, just a week before our beach wedding in Santa Monica. Back then, I was a newly graduated interior designer, and Matthew was already a rising executive in his family's real estate firm. Polished, charming, and magnetic, he told me signing the prenup was just a simple protection, that everything would be ours, not just his or mine. I believed him. Sophia turned the papers toward me, watching my face closely. "Remember when you said Matthew kept the only copy?" I nodded. "He said it was in the bank safe. I never thought I'd need to read it again." "Then it's possible Matthew never read it thoroughly either." Sophia flipped to the final page, her red, polished finger landing on a line of text so tiny it almost looked hidden. "Clause 14b, she said. "If the marriage lasts more than 10 years, this entire agreement becomes void, and any assets acquired during the marriage must be divided equitably under California state law." I went numb. "We've been married 11 years, I whispered. Sophia gave a subtle nod, her eyes glinting like she'd just drawn an ace. "And if I'm right, he hasn't realized it. Matthew's playing a game. He thinks he's already won." I stared at that little line of text, suddenly brighter than any painting I'd ever made. My palms were slick with sweat, but not from fear. Because now I knew the real fight hadn't even started, and I, Isabella Martin, wasn't entering it to lose. I held the contract, my fingers trembling as they brushed over the tiny sentence at the bottom of page 7, as if afraid it would vanish if I blinked. "If the marriage exceeds 10 years, this contract becomes void, and all assets created during the marital period shall be equitably divided under California state law, regardless of ownership or original capital source." My vision blurred. 11 years of marriage. A decade in which I gave up my design career, moved to the outskirts of Vinewood to run our household, host clients, and throw dinner parties for his business associates. I once believed those sacrifices were the foundation for our shared future. Now I knew they were also the foundation for this legal reckoning. I looked at Sophia. "Why doesn't he know this?" She gave a soft, sharp smile. "Because Matthew never reads anything carefully except financial reports. I'd bet he schemed and signed like every overconfident CEO who thinks his lawyers cover everything." Swallowed hard. "So, what do we do?" Sophia placed her pen on the table, her tone lowering. "We say nothing. Matthew thinks he has this locked up. Let him stay asleep. The more convinced he is that you have nothing, the more powerful your position becomes." I leaned back in the chair, heart pounding. I never imagined I'd sit in a negotiation that could shift entirely on one overlooked clause on page 7, AE, page slightly bent at the corner, as if the universe itself had marked it for me. The next day, I stepped into the 2-story wooden home in Beverly Hills, the place we once called ours, with a different light in my eyes. Matthew wasn't home. Of course. Not ever since filing for divorce. He only came by to grab things, never to stay overnight. At first, I thought it was his schedule. Then I found out he was living with Megan, the 26-year-old assistant he'd appointed to all the roles I used to hold: partner, planner, social face. I passed through the kitchen, where I'd once prepped dinner for dozens of client events, and climbed the stairs to Matthew's study, still locked. I smiled slightly. The password had never changed. April 8, 23, his birthday. Predictable, just like him. I wasn't searching for anything illegal. I just wanted to understand what he thought he had. On his desk was a neatly printed copy of the prenup, marked in red ink. I opened it. No page 7. My chest tightened. I checked carefully. Only 6 pages. The last page held my signature. And his, Matthew Brandon, in familiar blue ink. No sign he'd ever seen the full version. I took out my phone, snapped photos of each page, then left the room without a trace. That evening, he called, the first time in almost a month. "I'm trying to handle this with class, Bella. You know that," he said softly, like I should be grateful he hadn't thrown me out already. "Drew says you're stalling. If you drag this out, it'll get messy. Think a goodwill payment is reasonable? You're still young. You can start over. I heard every word like needles pricking my skin. Start over? I spent over a decade crafting the image of the perfect wife for him, only to be treated like some squatter, offered a small support payment to quietly disappear. I replied, my voice so calm it even surprised me. Do you really think $50,000 can buy 11 years of someone's life? Matthew stayed silent. Maybe he was wondering if I'd figured something out, but then he just said, Don't turn this into a grudge, Isabella. I let out a faint laugh. You're mistaken. I don't hate you, but I'm not backing down anymore. After the call, I reopened the prenup and stared again at the fateful clause on page 7. Under the light, the fine print glowed more clearly, like a silent oath from the past, reminding me that I once believed. But now I knew the contract was void, and Matthew had no idea. He thought I was still the soft-hearted 25-year-old who rushed into signing papers out of love. What he didn't realize was that the woman soon to sit across from him was the present-day Isabella Martin, a woman who knew her worth and was ready to claim it. The next morning, I met with Sophia at a quiet cafe in La Jolla, tucked behind a line of willow trees. It was peaceful and discreet, ideal for a plan I never imagined I'd be part of, slowly flipping the script on a divorce battle. Sophia didn't bring her laptop, just a slim file folder and her usual calm gaze. She pulled out a chair for me, placed her latte on the table, and got straight to the point. We say nothing about page 7, not a single word. I nodded, agreeing. Instead, we let Matthew go on believing he's in control. Meanwhile, we start collecting proof of everything you contributed to this marriage. Every dollar you invested, every career opportunity you gave up, every relationship you built. I gave a rueful smile, including those cocktail parties where I had to chat for hours with investors' wives, while Matthew disappeared with his buddies, especially those. Sophia raised an eyebrow. This is a double-edged sword. Matthew has spent years building a self-made man image. If we prove otherwise that his success is inseparable from you, it changes everything. I opened my bag and pulled out a stack of photos and a USB drive. I've already started. These are design boards I created for his first 2 real estate projects. And here's a video of me giving his investor pitch in 2017 when he had the flu. Sophia looked at me, clearly impressed. You kept all this? Not because I was being cautious, I answered slowly. I used to think they were our shared accomplishments. Now I'm keeping them to prove they weren't just his. For the next 3 weeks, I lived as 2 different versions of myself. One, Isabella, who sat across from Matthew at mediation sessions, polite, tired, seemingly ready to negotiate. And another Isabella, who quietly met with former colleagues, gathering emails, drafts, and thank you notes from past partners. What were once sentimental mementos were now evidence. I reconnected with Sharon, the former PR director of Matthew's company, before he restructured and replaced her with Megan. You know, Sharon said, handing me a campaign draft I wrote 8 years ago. I used to think Matthew was lucky to marry someone as sharp and capable as you, but later I realized he just knew how to use what you brought to the table. I gave a faint, sad smile. It took me way too long to see that. I also visited Mr. Graham, the lead architect of the Canyon Heights estate, where I had spent nearly 4 months reviewing sketches, fine-tuning color schemes, and enhancing the modern natural aesthetic. That project went on to win the state's Excellence in Real Estate Award in 2020. Isabella, I've never forgotten you, he said sincerely. Without your input, that place would have looked like a row of fancy tin boxes. You gave it soul. But I thought you were the design director? Why isn't your name anywhere on record? I swallowed hard. It never appeared. Matthew told me, there's no need to stamp your name on everything. Mr. Graham gently squeezed my hand. Well, now it's time to put it back on. That evening, I sat cross-legged on the living room floor beside the stone fireplace. One I had handpicked in Italy. Sorting through folders, Sophia helped me organize. On the table was a growing list of emails I'd sent on Matthew's behalf, nameless projects I managed, and partner meetings I arranged that he could never remember. Each line, each piece of data, was a quiet reminder. I wasn't the shadow. Behind him. I was the one keeping the lights on. A week later, at the next mediation session, Matthew walked in with his usual smug smile. He wore a cream cashmere sweater, the collar of his shirt peeking just enough from beneath the soft fabric. Megan was outside in the hallway, glued to her phone. Sophia and I were already seated. We didn't say much. I kept my expression light, as if I were ready to accept whatever terms Matthew proposed. And that exactly was why he remained so confident. "I think $50,000 is reasonable," Matthew began. "And I can help you find a new place near the beach. Not everyone gets the chance to start over with that kind of support." I just smiled. "You've always had a way of making things sound like a gift." Sophia tilted her head and replied softly on my behalf. "We'll take it under consideration, but I believe Ms. Martin deserves a much more thorough evaluation." Matthew didn't get it. Not yet. But I knew by the time he did, there would be no exit left. I had just returned from a networking event in Westwood, something Sophia encouraged me to do to reestablish my professional ties, when I saw a white convertible parked right in front of the house. That familiar Porsche 911 wasn't Matthew's, but I knew exactly who was in the driver's seat: Megan. She was fumbling with the trunk, dressed in a ridiculously short skirt and a silk blouse tied in a bow at the front. In her hands was a paper bag of Japanese takeout and a bottle of red wine, the same brand I used to serve to VIP guests. I didn't need to ask. I knew Matthew was planning yet another work meeting inside the very house still under legal dispute, and where I still resided legally. "Oh, Isabella," Megan said awkwardly. "I just stopped by to grab some documents for him." I smiled, not even getting out of my car. "Careful with that bottle. It's a 2005 Chateau Margaux. Market value is about $1,200. Megan blushed, murmured a thank you, and slipped in, through the back door. I sat in the car for a few more minutes, waiting for my heartbeat to slow down. I didn't feel hurt anymore, just disgusted with the same tired little game Matthew thought would make me jealous or give up. Inside the house, I didn't see them, but on the kitchen counter sat a poured glass of wine, an open sushi tray, and a project folder from Matthew's company spread across the very table I spent 3 weeks selecting wood grain and finish for. The house felt like a stage now, and me? I wasn't playing a supporting role anymore. That evening, Matthew leaned against the doorway to my room, still holding his wine glass. "She just stopped by for documents," he said, like he was talking to a maid. "No need to be so tense, Bella." I looked at him calmly. "I'm not tense. I'm just surprised you brought your girlfriend into the house when your future ex-wife still lives here." He shrugged. "I thought things were clear between us." "No ruling has been made, Matthew." "Well, I'm trying to move things along." He set the glass down on the wooden shelf. "By the way, Drew said he'll resend the offer Friday. Still the same amount, $50,000. I think it's a fair deal. You could get a small condo, start fresh, find something that fits your skill set. Maybe librarian or interior designer." I laughed, but not because it was funny. "And what job do you think I'm suited for?" He didn't catch the sarcasm. "I'm trying to help you. Really. No one wants to drag this out. Take the money and be free. Better than sitting here thinking you were ever important to my career." I looked him in the eye. "You never thought I was important. Just convenient." Matthew shrugged again. "Well, I appreciated that convenience. But now I have someone else to assist with work." I nodded slowly. "I know the new one's good at printing documents, tapping a phone screen, and picking wine bars, right?" His face darkened. "Don't be bitter, Isabella. She's younger, more energetic. You can't blame me." "Oh no," I smiled. "I don't blame you. I just think it's funny that a 43-year-old man thinks he's entering his prime because his new girlfriend knows how to use Instagram." He walked away after that without another word, but I knew my words had driven a thorn straight into that hollow ego of his. 2 days later, I received an invitation from the California Heritage Preservation Center. They offered me a temporary curator position for a historic theater restoration project in San Pedro. I had turned them down 3 years ago because Matthew said, "That job isn't worth your effort." Now they were back, and they came to me, not Matthew. I walked into the meeting with some of the top architects in the state, and no one asked about my personal life. No one mentioned the divorce. They simply said, "We need someone who understands history." has an eye for design, and can manage a complex budget. You're our first choice. I sat there surrounded by powerful professionals, realizing something Matthew never understood. He had never known me well enough to underestimate me. He didn't realize I still had strong professional relationships, that I was still trusted by partners, and that I had a name of my own outside his shadow. As I left the meeting, my phone buzzed, a text from Sophia. Drew's team sent their official response. They're still insisting on the prenup. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Perfect. Matthew was still playing a chess game he thought he controlled, but he had no idea the queen was still off the board, and I hadn't made my move yet. That Monday morning, I stepped into the IR Office of Special Collections at the San Diego City Museum of Art. The smell of old books, archival paper, and oak from the antique display cases gave me the feeling of returning to myself. No longer Matthew's wife, no longer the woman behind the curtain at glamorous dinner parties meant to impress clients. Now, I was the director of Special Collections, responsible for restoring, curating, and organizing international-scale exhibits, with full budget authority and curatorial control. Margaret, an old friend and now head of exhibitions, hugged me tightly as she handed me the exhibition layout. "We've waited 3 years for this day," she whispered. "Welcome back to the real world, Isabella." I smiled. Thanks for not forgetting me, even when I forgot myself. Less than 2 weeks later, I had my first meeting with the Delano Theater Restoration Committee in San Pedro. The building, built in the 1920s, had once hosted classic stage performances before falling into disrepair and nearly being demolished. Seated around the table were representatives from the State Department of Culture, the lead donor, a group of preservation architects, and the person who invited me, Camille Whitaker, a former close friend before Matthew slowly isolated me from everyone. Camille walked over and hugged me like no time had passed. "Alexander is so excited to work with you again," she said, her eyes genuinely gleaming. "You're the only person with both the aesthetic and historical depth this project needs." The meeting ran over 3 hours. I presented my proposal to preserve the original Art Deco paintwork, suggested a non-invasive lighting method for the gilded ceiling details, and introduced a plan to monitor the restoration process using augmented reality 3D imaging. When I finished speaking, the room went quiet for a beat, then applause broke out. Not because I was the CEO's wife, but because I was the real deal. After the meeting, Alexander shook my hand and said, "I forgot what it was like to hear someone speak who truly understands every brick and molding of a building they love. Thank you for agreeing to work with us." I just smiled, filled with a rare feeling, pride, without needing anyone's permission. Days later, I received an invitation to the California Statewide Historic Architecture Preservation Forum. My name appeared in the keynote speaker section right next to leading art and architecture experts. Sophia, after seeing the speaker list, just laughed. "Can't wait to see Matthew's face when he sees your name there." I didn't care what Matthew thought anymore because now I had a name of my own. Not Isabella Davenport, but Isabella Martin, the name I set aside 12 years ago to chase someone else's dream. One night, I sat alone in my new office, reviewing material for the upcoming exhibit, Anonymous Women in 20th Century Design. Something made me pause. A black and white photo taken in 1947. A woman stood at a construction site holding blueprints with 3 men looking toward her. The photo was untitled. "At the glass, they always kept us behind the camera," murmured. But not anymore. I decided that photo would open the exhibit. It told the story I had lived and was now rewriting in my own voice. That night, I came home late. On the kitchen counter, Megan had left a short note asking me to pick up some of Matthew's things for the new apartment. "Hope that's okay." I felt nothing. Matthew had begun to retreat from the house, leaving behind a pile of memories I no longer needed to decode. He didn't know that the very people he once called his contacts were now calling me for expert advice. The network he claimed as his own was now reaching out to me directly. No one was calling Matthew to restore a cultural landmark. No one was inviting him to evaluate the historical significance of a site. He had money, a fancy car, and Megan, But he no longer had a name in this field, at least not one that mattered. And me? I was rebuilding my reputation, step by step. With my own knowledge, effort, and real value, I texted Sophia, ready to drop page 7. She replied in under a minute. Tomorrow, game over. An emergency hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. Thursday at the Santa Clara County Family Court. I arrived early with Jessica, wearing the fitted navy suit I once wore to interview for the museum director position. No accessories chosen by Matthew, no perfume he ever bought. Everything on me that day was mine, and mine alone. The courtroom was modest, mahogany paneling, natural light slanting in from high windows, creating an atmosphere that was quiet yet weighty. Across from us, Matthew and his attorney, Brent Halpern, were already seated. Halpern had a reputation for handling high-asset divorces, but neither of them looked at ease today. Jessica leaned in and whispered, "We've tied them up with their own weapon. Now, we just pull the curtain." Judge Karen Blake entered, a silver-haired woman in her 60s, known for her calm, no-nonsense demeanor. "We are reviewing an emergency petition in the divorce case of Isabella Martin and Matthew Dawson. Petitioner, proceed." Jessica stood, her voice steady and clear. "Your Honor, the petitioner presents newly surfaced evidence that directly impacts the validity of the prenuptial agreement, which the respondent has repeatedly cited as the sole basis for property division." Halpern frowned, but before he could object, Jessica stepped forward and handed 3 marked copies of the prenup to the clerk, each with page 7 flagged in bright yellow. "Please direct your attention to section 14B on page 7, Jessica continued, which clearly states, if the marriage exceeds 10 years, this agreement shall become void, and property division shall follow the civil laws of the state of California." The room fell into a tense silence. I saw Matthew twitch slightly, leaning in to whisper to Halpern. His expression shifted from confident to alarmed. Halpern flipped to page 7, scanned it, and then said nothing. Judge Blake lifted one of the copies, nodding slowly. "This is a standard sunset clause, common in many firm-drafted prenups from over a decade ago. It appears intact, with both parties' initials and signatures at the bottom." Halpern found his voice. "Your Honor, this clause was never mentioned in any previous discussion. It's possible it was inserted post-signing." The judge's brows lifted, her tone turning cold. "Are you suggesting forgery of a legal contract?" "No, not exactly," he faltered. Judge Blake methodically turned each page in silence, then said, "Both parties initialed every page, including page 7. There are no signs of tampering or formatting inconsistencies. Furthermore, the respondent has repeatedly invoked this document as the primary legal basis, both during negotiations and informal correspondence." She looked directly at Matthew. "Mr. Dawson, did you read the full prenuptial agreement before signing and before using it? As your legal defense?" He swallowed. "I trusted my attorney at the time." "And who was that?" "Robert Harland. He retired in 2014. Jessica interjected gently, yet pointedly. Robert Harland was a partner at Jennings and Lee, a firm known for automatically including 10-year sunset clauses in all their prenups during that period. The judge straightened. "Based on the documents presented, I confirm that the clause on page 7 is valid. Therefore, the prenuptial agreement became null and void as of the 11th year of this marriage, nearly 2 years before the divorce filing." Silence was so absolute that the hum of the ceiling fan overhead felt louder than it should have. The judge gave a small tap of the gavel. "The court declares the prenuptial agreement invalid. All marital assets, including real estate, investments, and property acquired during the marriage, shall be divided in accordance with state civil law." Matthew bowed his head, clutching the fabric of his tailored vest. I didn't say a word. I simply looked at him, and in his eyes, I saw it. The disbelief, the collapse of the towering confidence he once wore like armor. When we stepped out of the courtroom, Jessica leaned over and whispered, "Page 7 flipped the entire game. Now the real part begins." I let out a soft laugh, and this time I'm playing to the end. Matthew left the courthouse with heavy steps and a stony face, his jaw clenched so tight it looked like it might snap. He didn't say a word, didn't glance back. He just silently climbed into the black Range Rover parked along the curb. Halpern hurried after him, arms full of files that were now completely useless. I stayed on the courthouse steps, letting the late afternoon sun warm my face, the April breeze brushing against my cheek like a quiet reminder. I was back, not as Mrs. Matthew Dawson, but as Isabella Martin, independent, unwavering, and fully whole. There was nothing left to negotiate. With the prenup rendered void and extensive evidence of my financial and social contributions throughout 12 years, Judge Blake ordered an equitable division of assets. I was granted 50% of all investments, properties, equity, and marital acquisitions, including ownership of the Palo Alto home, the one where I had chosen every tile and pendant light. I also received shares in the tech company Matthew once claimed he built entirely on his own, and with that, I wasn't just financially secure. I had enough to invest, expand, and move forward on my own terms. A week later, I officially began my role as Director of Special Collections at the San Jose Museum of Contemporary Art. On my first day, I walked into that glass-walled building, feeling like I was stepping into a whole new life. I was no longer behind the curtain. I was center stage. That afternoon, as I was reviewing documents for the Franklin Theater restoration project, my phone rang. It was Camille Whitman. "Congratulations, Isabella," she said. "We're thrilled you accepted the lead on the restoration. Team, Alexander especially loved the proposal you sent yesterday." I smiled, brushing my hand over the technical draft laid out on the desk. "I used to think I'd never get to do work that mattered again," I replied. "Thank you for believing in me." "It's not belief, it's recognition," Camille said gently. "You've always been at the heart of the success Matthew thought was his alone." I paused, letting those words settle. Then I answered simply, "I know." That evening, I stopped by the old house to pick up the last of my personal things. Matthew wasn't there. According to his attorney, he had fully moved into his new penthouse in Mission Bay. The house felt strangely quiet, but not painful anymore. I walked down the hallway, ran my fingers along the wall where our wedding photo used to hang, and removed the final nail. I had once believed in love inside that house. Now, I believed in myself. After loading the final box into the trunk, I sat behind the wheel, opened my phone, and saw a message from Jessica. "Congrats. Today is the first day of the rest of your life." I hit the lock button and backed out of that familiar street. No tears, no looking back. Just a strange, beautiful calm, like my body was shedding every outdated piece of memory. Months later, my first exhibition as curator at the museum drew over 300 guests: investors, journalists, artists, and scholars from across the state. Right before I stepped up for my keynote speech, the museum's executive director took my hand and said, "We knew we had the right person, Isabella. You're not just an expert, you're a true leader." I stepped onto the stage to thunderous applause, the spotlight casting a warm halo over the room. I didn't feel nervous. I didn't feel like an outsider anymore. I had become the main character in my own story. And as I looked down at the front row, where Camille and Alexander Whitman beamed with pride, I thought of Matthew, not with anger, but with release. He could keep the fragments of the past. I didn't need them. Did I get nothing from the divorce? I got myself back, and that was everything. Isabella's story isn't just about reclaiming assets. It's about reclaiming herself from being dismissed and sidelined in her own marriage. She rose to rebuild her career, reclaim her identity, and speak her truth in real life too. When women understand their rights and demand fairness, they don't just reclaim property, they reclaim dignity, voice, and a future unshackled from the past. What would you have done in Isabella's place? Share your thoughts below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more emotional, powerful stories about family, justice, and finding your voice.